2 notes before we start today's show. Today's episode is on how to move the assassins and assassin societies from Trinity Continuum Assassin to the World of Darkness. I think it's a absolutely beautiful fit. The book we mentioned, Trinity Continuum Assassins, is an expansion for Trinity Continuum, meaning if you want to play the actual Assassin game and not just steal from it, like I'm advocating from, you'll need Trinity Continuum Core. Trinity Assassins is currently on DriveThruRPG in manuscript preview, meaning if you get it now, you will see an ever-growing part of the ultimate text as time goes on before the full book is released. If you want to wait until the whole thing is out, that's fine too. I think we have a good conversation, and even if you don't pick up anything, I think it gives a bunch of really good ideas on interesting things that you can add to your Mage game and World of Darkness games in general. Today's conversation also includes much more casual swearing than our normal episodes, so I'm going to mark this one as explicit. We do also talk about violence in the bloody and glamorous world of being an assassin. If that's not your cup of tea, next week's episode is on the Syndicate. Also, there are outtakes and cut bits that are going to be after the credits. They too are explicit. And with that, hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson, and today my guest is developer and writer Monica Speca. Monica has worked on a number of game lines for both storytelling and StoryPath systems and is here today to talk about superhuman assassins. This is tied to the book Trinity Assassins, but as Monica introduced me to the phrase, this is something that you can file the serial numbers off of and use it in your own game. Assassins is so already close in my mind to how it could work in WoD that it's not at that level. It's at the cover it with a Sharpie level in terms of how much work you have to do to move this into your game. Trinity Assassins is currently available through DriveThruRPG during a preview period. If you get it now, you will get regular updates until the ultimate text comes out, and then hopefully a discount code. So if you do decide to get the POD, it comes out to be the same price. Links for that is in the show notes. Monica, is it terrifying to you or relieving to you to have the book at this phase where, like, the text is kind of out there, but the finished artifact is not available to people?
Well, Terry, I survived the Exalted Essence Kickstarter. Nothing scares me anymore.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable.
There is nothing to get you over the fear of your text being released to an audience other than an unedited version of a highly anticipated manuscript being released to 4,000 people, and then having to comb through a spreadsheet of their objections to your work. This is great. It's doing fantastic on DriveThruRPG. It already hit. It is Electrum currently, so 250. All right. It's been sitting pretty in the top 5 on DriveThruRPG since it came out. Also, the reception has been pretty universally positive. In comparison, what a goddamn relief.
So, Monica, what's an assassin?
Assassins are talents. Do we know what talents are?
What's a talent?
Okay, so a talent is a competence porn regular guy character. They are the cast of Leverage, which is a great touchstone for that. Leverage is a really excellent show, and I think it's free on Amazon Prime Video.
Amazon Prime Video, as well as Apple TV.
And it is a crime drama, I would say, but it is specifically about ex-criminals helping people who have been screwed either by a corporation or by like a significantly powerful person, and then these ex-criminals find the leverage, reverse con the person in power who has screwed over this regular person, and through their crime trickery get the person in power to confess or relent on whatever it is they're doing to screw the other person, and usually our heroes win at the end. And it usually involves the fun crime fiction of like weirdly, legally dubiously talented people do this thing that is ultimately altruistic. And it is always someone, like a regular person who has been screwed over like by their insurance or by the hospital or by like a pharmaceutical company. And so you have your cast of characters with specific roles, like the leader is an insurance fraud guy who's really analytical, and he's sort of like the mastermind, and he tells everybody what to do. And the one guy is the muscle, he does all the fighting. And then one of them is a thief and an acrobat, and she's the person who's like hiding in all the vents and brings the rope and wears all the disguises. And then one of them's the face, who's the con woman who does all the accents, and she staples of crime drama. And so Trinity Continuum and talents are those people. The things that talents can do sort of fit into those other hyper-competent, extremely skilled people, but they are still just regular people. There's nothing supernatural about them.
So the talents are preternaturally capable rather than supernaturally capable at
Yeah.
something. And I imagine there's an in-world explanation of that. And each of them kind of leverages a type of competence porn, which is somebody who solves a problem by being very good at their job. Pointing a gun at someone's face and saying, open the vault or I shoot you, is not competence porn. Someone very delicately disassembling the lock mechanism by touch or by taste or something like that is competence porn. And within the genre, as Monica said, that includes its leverage, Mad Men, MacGyver, Mission Impossible, a lot of things I realize that now begin with M. Star Trek, for me, The West Wing, shows about a collections of people who solve the problem by doing it very, very well. And here, the thing they happen to be very good at is planning down,
murder,
executing, and then concealing the act of snuffing out the light of human life.
Assassins are talents, so we start with this whole, like, competence porn. It is explicit that assassins are still regular people. Trinity Continuum, all of it is pretty big on none of this is specifically supernatural, which I think Aberrant pushes the suspension of disbelief on, because that is specifically about superpowers, but it's not supposed to be magic. It's flux, it's luck, it's bending probability. These powers don't come from a god or anything.
And the expressions of all the powers, to put it into mage terms, everything is coincidental. Someone can be preternaturally good at sword fighting, but there is no moment where they manifest like a effing lightsaber from their palm or anything like that.
Yes, totally.
They are at the very limits of what is possible, and they happen to set up houses there, is what I would say.
Right, yes.
Some people skirt the edge. They have summer homes there.
No, they live on the edge of what is possible and have built a home there, correct.
They kill people. What kind of, how are they organized and who are they killing? Is it just contract work for hire, or how does that work?
Yes. The answer to that question is yes. They are organized into things called societies with a capital S, because this is a Onyx Path product. And each society has an ethos about who they kill and why. And what contracts you take usually depend on the sort of thing that your society leans towards. And there are 5 named major societies, 2 named historical societies, and then I think 5 more named minor societies, which the minor societies don't get, like, a ton of screen time, but they're one of my favorite things in the book. But we'll get to that later.
So Mage the Ascension is a world that has contract killing organizations in it. Kind of. You have the Golden Chalice, which is the group within the Euthanatoi that execute people. You have the Janissaries, which are a group of hermetics that are often doing it for political reasons. You have the extra legal division within the Syndicate Enforcers that kill people. You have the Chorister Martial Orders. So, like, even the super religious folks are like, yep, sometimes you just need to cut a bitch. And thanks, Mage. And then you have the Akashiana, the Akashic Brotherhood, who don't have a ninja order so much as when someone really needs to die, somebody is given a book on how to die people. And that is my that is my favorite. Like, when you largely have a group that consists of human weapons, you don't need a subgroup of human weapons. You just hit the assassin button for that particular person, and they're able to kind of go out and do that. In Mage, we have the rule of shade that prevents this from spilling out in the open. You have the whole problem of paradox. You have the technocracy or the Nefandi who may come down on you. What is the thing that prevents this from being an all-out murder fest?
Well, first off, why don't assassins just kill everyone? And that is because murdering lots of people is mental illness, and killing one person for a pile of money is a job. But also, they don't just kill each other because they have a code that says don't do this. And when you basically sign on to being an assassin, like your moment of inspiration awakens you to being an assassin rather than just a vanilla talent. So you join a society and then you agree as part of the thing that, like, hey, I swear to kill the people that I'm contracted to kill. I swear not to kill other assassins. You know, when you enter into this agreement as part of the society, you are presumed to follow those rules. And if you don't follow those rules, they'll kick you out, and that's bad.
So there is more or less, you have these different groups within it who agree to abide by this code. There is nothing magical enforcing it, but there are some very practical things enforcing it. You lose the protection of this aegis. You are now fair game to everyone else. Is there a organization that enforces it, or is it strictly social? And again, this is something that we already have in Mage. We have the precepts of Damien. If you are a member of the technocracy, the backbone of what the organization does. We have the protocols within the traditions. Each craft kind of has its mode of ethics, and the neat thing in Mage is we can make this all magical by adding a geesh to it. With the glory of entropy, like, you've agreed to this, and oh, by the way, if you break it, your bones will explode. Or something equally subtle.
A contract is a promise, and so the modern code is a contract between all participants in the shadow, a standard of behavior to which all assassins from the secret masters to the newest recruits must adhere. Those who violate its tenets are marked anathema and cast out from shadow if not executed. An ejected assassin is a liminal being with nowhere to belong in daylight and unable to return to shadow. Execution is a mercy. And I'm pretty sure it is the service that forcibly retires you.
Who has the ability to call out a hit?
Typically, that comes from the shadowy organization that is in charge of your society. We name a couple people as, like, society leadership, but that is a pretty robust place for storytellers to create their own characters, their own Mr. Johnsons in this particular case. Unlike the Shadowrun reference, the person who is handing you your contract is certainly not out to screw you.
And this could be one of those things where those disembodied masters could be cosmic forces. I would love to see a Mage game where the Umbral Courts hand out these contracts because of some agreement they promise not to act to each other. If you want to go the Demon the Fallen route, you could literally have angels handing out contracts to Mage because of some ancient accord. I'm just saying, like...
I would play in that game.
Yeah. There are the practical reasons. There is this agreement that has occurred, and that allows us to keep the urban fantasy trope of the hidden things stay hidden. You made mention to groups. Who are these groups in Assassin?
All right, so the groups are the societies that we mentioned earlier. The game presents you with 5 major societies to belong to. They are the Daughters of the Jacobins, the Krugervorov, the Society of Leonidas, the Swarm, and the Signal. Those are the big 5.
Those sound interesting and evocative. Shall we share who they are?
You seem very excited. Which one would you like to talk about first?
I think the Society of Leonidas wins. But the Society of Leonidas is a group of ascetic assassins whose history date back to the ancient world. They are the most numerous and powerful of the societies. Their practice established many of the codes and traditions in the world of shadow. When you hand tokens back and forth as an indicator of wealth and favor, they tend to be these ancient coins. They are strongly bound by codes of ethics, and it is one of those things where just because someone is ethical does not mean that they are good.
Good, yep.
Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men very much had an ethical code, was not a good guy. So I appreciate it anytime that we can have an organization that is just like, well, time to assassinate someone. Get your finest bronze spear.
Yeah, they also have this cool, like, martial tradition thing going for them. Absolutely the sort of person who, like, shows up to an assassination with a bronze spear, and then they just murk a dude and leave. And people are like, he just killed that man with a bronze weapon.
And the Hoplon, the Aspis?
Hoplon, yeah.
Yeah.
Hoplon is the shield.
One of the cool perks you can get later is whenever you murk a bitch, to use the technical term, people only remember one thing about you. And I like the idea. They're like, who killed him? And they're like, I don't know. He was just wearing socks with sandals. And like, that's the only thing that they remember about you. And maybe I'm bad at the world of darkness.
No, I think that's fantastic. That sounds right to me.
Yeah.
Also, there's a light implication that I enjoy, and this is very much Violet's sense of humor, and her development on this was incredible, and I was so grateful to have her as part of this. But, like, there's also a light implication that the Society of Leonidas are posers, and that they're probably just either Victorians or people from the Renaissance pretending to be ancient Greeks, and that hint is so funny to me. That's just her sense of humor in a nutshell, and I like that implication. Is it true? Nobody can prove it one way or another.
And can you share a society with us, Monica?
Let's talk about the Swarm, who was created by a brand new author who joined us for this book, Their whole thing is that, one, they're based out of Japan, and they train assassins like as a corporate mass production thing, right? The text indicates that most of the time, most people go through their swarm assassin training, and all that they get out of that is like some fighting moves and a certificate they can pin up on their desk. But every so often, you get someone who actually hits their moment of inspiration, and then they're like, ah, yes, we're keeping you. What they're very good at is taking out other inspired people. They are the newest group to have joined the, like, austere council of assassins. They're the newest ones, and some people see them as, like, illegitimate because they aren't that old. They embrace the modernity of, like, using technology and turning their focus towards other empowered individuals. A little bit of implication that, like, their specialization in killing other inspired kind of scares the other people.
They had a real Crazy 88 vibe to me.
Yeah.
But the thing I really like is the thing you mentioned, that they put a lot of people through, and there is somebody watching this process to see if anyone is inspired in this moment. I could very much see the Syndicate or the New World Order in Mage having people that have these executive MBA programs where people are very quickly pushed through some sort of executive education, or there's a special one where there's also a fitness component to it, where it's like run 20 miles and then deliver your pitch, and we'll see how you do there. And that is basically a way for the technocracy to pluck out people who may awaken. And again, you say this isn't a Mage supplement, but it's all right there. One that struck me was the Signal, because in Mage the Ascension we have the Sphinx, this enigmatic entity that sends out these communiques that just stirs up shit in Revised, and suddenly you get a data packet that shows that your enemy has a loved one of yours or a bit of information, and here happens to be the key combination to the front gate or what have you. The recurring line that they say is, Enigma will take you where Dogma cannot. And here the Signal is a pirate radio society run by an enigmatic host who directs the cooperation of a diverse alliance of marginalized assassins. The Signal focuses more on the cause than the payment. One of the recurring themes that we have in urban fantasy is often there is a group that represents the dispossessed. How do you make a society out of the fact that the only thing that you share is the fact that you don't share anything except for the fact that you are dispossessed? The unifying idea of the Dream Speakers is they're all marginalized indigenous people. So even if there isn't a lot of common belief, there is certainly a common cause, if nothing else. I also kind of had to think of, who was the voice in The Warriors? Lynn Thigpen is the DJ who is narrating the movement of the Warriors throughout the city of New York as they try and get home after they've been framed for this killing at a gang get-together, and was also the voice of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? If you remember the
black
woman.
I thought that name sounded vaguely familiar.
So the idea of a society of assassins led
the chief.
Get 'em, gumshoes. Yep.
I don't think we ever describe the voice of the host, just that there's this pirate radio station. Assassins know how to tune into it. The host makes a broadcast and tells people where to go.
And is so gloriously and beautifully retro that one of the recurring... I don't know if it's supposed to be there, but the whole idea with Trinity of there being flux that kind of bends reality a little bit creates this feeling of like adjacency to it. And just the fact that you need to tune into a pirate radio at a particular shortwave band at a particular time of night near a satellite dish or something to hear it that no one can quite explain, I really think creates that mood of mystery without it being weird or necessarily horror. And I think that's something the Trinity setting is uniquely capable of doing compared to a lot of the other OPP settings.
It's creepy, but it isn't horror.
Yeah, I'll certainly take that. It is between cool, mysterious, and creepy. It occupies that band of the horror spectrum. What's another group, Monica?
Let's talk about the Krugovorov, the mystery cult of Russian assassins who call themselves the Thieves-in-Law, who are probably our most organized crime group. We haven't talked about like the Stations of Darkness at all yet, but we'll get to that. But they oversee Twilight, which is sort of the in-between phase where daylight is regular people and shadow is the world the assassins live in, and then like organized crime, gangs, any sort of mundane criminal enterprises happen in Twilight. The Krugovorov oversee their associations in Twilight, and they are especially keen on punishing transgressions against their ruling body, who are called the Seven Princes. And they are not all men, it's just that name's pretty cool.
Yeah. And again, this is something that I think is beautifully stealable for Mages of the Ascension, that you have a group of mortals that, for whatever reason, mages of all stripe trust not to spill the beans, or maybe other supernaturals as well, who are like, we can serve this community and make bank off of it. And we trade in secrecy and the ability to enforce and move information. So, and I mean, who doesn't want to be a thief in law?
Yeah, I don't think I really touched on it at all reading the sort of the top-down description that, like, the thieves in law thing is that they have sort of an element of found family, or maybe at least forced family, where you mentioned, like, community and connection, and, like, this man is your brother in arms, this woman is your cousin in killing, like, your family kind of whether you like it or not, and that's sort of part of their motif.
You have the Daughters of the Jacobins, which was a society focused on freedom and violent change dating back to the French Revolution. They believe all assassins should be held accountable for the outcomes of their deadly actions. And in Mage terms, this to me felt like a combination of the Sisters of Hippolyta, who have been agitating for violent equality and revolution for, at this point, millennia, as well as, who is it, Baron Mordo in Doctor Strange, who is like, oh no, you need to pay for your magic. And that's a real fun Venn diagram to have some overlap on, or at least that's my thought. Just like the other group, just because it is the Daughters of the Jacobins, I don't know it to be gender exclusive.
No, it's not gender exclusive.
Yeah.
I was just getting ready to be like, this is not the woman faction. I hate it when a game has a woman faction. I hate it so much.
A woman faction and a brown direction. Game should have neither.
Yep. You should never have a woman faction. You should never have a brown direction. Don't do either of these things. That's bad and boring. It's just a name, but it is led by women. We leaned into led by women, but it is not a gender exclusive society. And they are not just women. They are clairvoyant women. An important part of the Daughters of the Jacobins is that their leadership claims to be able to read the future, which may or may not be true. And if you look at their powers, the answer is yes, it's true, but we're winking at you a little bit.
It's not with surety, but they do probably get 3 or 4 enhancement.
Yeah.
There's also a pair of historical groups as well as some of the lesser groups. Monica, did you have a favorite historical group that was introduced?
They're both really good, and Violet made up both of these. So if you love them, they were Violet's call. The Worshipful Company of Killers is tremendous. I believe their signature move also made it into the final set of Masteries. Given their title, you might imagine that they were like, British Empire guys, and you are correct. They were assassins obsessed with etiquette, who killed at the behest of the aristocratic elite, and began to conduct their business across the world, killing in every corner of the empire. And by empire, we definitely mean the British one.
We also get the Heavenly Immortal Corps, which served the Ming Dynasty as an elite force of assassins tasked with securing the ingredients for the Elixir of Immortality. They blended alchemical mixtures with their Masteries to perform superhuman feat. Again, as Monica mentioned, Masteries are the term for kind of the powers that are maybe a little bit beyond human capacity as opposed to simply at the apex of human ability. And I like the idea of the Wu Lung having an attaché that does this, where they have assassins that are like, well, sometimes you just need a Qilin hoof, and only one person has it, and that person needs to do a little bit of bleeding if they're not going to give it to you. So, Monica, earlier you mentioned that there were minor societies in addition to the major societies and the historical ones. What are the minor societies?
Right, the minor societies. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of examples of one-off and very tiny membership societies. We wanted to demonstrate that the Assassin's world is not dominated by just these 5 things. That's one of the things that I sort of find kind of boring about a lot of Onyx Path / White Wolf things, where it's like, here's this whole world, only 5 things of it exist everywhere. So we introduced the minor societies because if you read the main 5 and are like, I don't like any of these, you can make up a minor society and be a member of a minor society and have your cake and eat it too. You just have to throw together a quick society path, or don't take a society path and take a nemesis path instead. Our examples include the Mountain Families, who are a close-knit group of Appalachian killers for hire. While coal mining boomed, the family held near major status along the east coast of the United States. The U.S. government eliminated their leadership in the 1980s, reducing them to minor status. They suspect all outsiders and refuse assistance.
Death by hammer, dulcimer.
The Rush, who are basically adrenaline junkies who become assassins.
Geddy Lee.
They accept membership from anyone as long as one is willing to pay the exorbitant entry fee and also die in a blaze of glory. There was only 4, there's not 5. The Honorable Order of Glassblowers is a selective group of assassin recruits, who they recruit only the inspired who share a talent for blowing glass. This skill has little to do with their killing methods. The rumor holds each new member must craft their own glass blade and use it in their first assignment. And I'm going to be honest, that was in there because I was watching the glass blowing competition show on Netflix when I wrote these. And I thought that was cool. And then it has a quick note that says players who wish to be a member of one of these minor societies or play a holdout from a society long lost to history should craft their own society path using the rules starting on page XX. So we explicitly give you the okay to be the one member of the Honorable Order of Glassblowers in this game if you want to be. And I will say that if you watch the Netflix movie Gunpowder Milkshake, that movie is entirely about a minor society. This is probably my favorite detail that we added. And it's one of the things that makes me super interested in the Assassin's world.
And that seems like one of those things where like each would have their own masteries too, even if they aren't enumerated here. That seems like a real good foundation to be like, oh, they can do this weird thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Each one definitely has their own weird secret technique that has something to do with whatever their thing is.
In case of emergency, break glass.
To
quote the Bard, this shit writes itself. Continuing on. So in the World of Darkness, the question I always had was, so these assassins are really cool. What are they? Because just like the World of Darkness and Exalted 2E, all questions have to have a canon answer that is somewhat unsatisfying and stupid. So I came up with kind of a few options for if you want to have these assassin-type characters in their game. You could posit a World of Darkness where magical assassination is hard and people want plausible deniability. For instance, the interfering aspect of magical resonance could make it difficult, or the fact that anytime a mage kills someone, it incurs jor, morbidity, that first step of dark quietude that turns into an obsession for death. Assassins may work at arm's distance from the various groups. For instance, the swarm could be the sorceress arm for the Go Kamisori Gama, which was one of the crafts that was listed in M20 but never defined. So you could have this awesome moment where you're like, oh, obviously these are these crazy East Asian assassins, and it turns out it's like, no, that is the mortal low-level rung, and above that, that's where the hypertech ninjas start to appear. Alternatively, the assassin societies could exist as part of a tradition or a multi-tradition group. The Medians are the guardians of the Council of the Nine, but the Society of Leonidas could be the multi-traditional group that sees to the executions whenever a mage needs to be tracked down and killed, and this could be the alternative to how we traditionally show Gilgul, and it could be composed of various traditions. It could be a rank or an appellation that one gets as a member, or it could be done ex post facto. You have tracked down and killed a member of the tradition, an enemy of the traditions. You are now an honorary member of the Society of Leonidas, kind of like the boon one can get for killing someone who's on the red list for the Camarilla. They could be blending awakened magic with trained assassins. In that case, assassins get their assassiny powers as a side effect of being born and raised in the Umbra. We understand that in the World of Darkness, there are tens of thousands of mortals who live off-world, who they themselves are not otherwise supernatural. Maybe the flux that is wielded by talents is what happens when a mortal spends enough time beyond the gauntlet, or interfaces with enough quintessence, or something else, sees a giant paradox backlash. There's a bunch of ways to keep it as is without translating it to a magey thing and still have it in your game. There's a few other options before sharing those. Monica, you say there's some things that will help kind of elucidate how assassins exist in the world without everyone knowing. You made mention to the Stations of Darkness, which, as a former Catholic, I can only think of the Stations of the Cross.
Stations of the Cross.
It's fucking badass. I don't think there's a tie, but still. What is that?
If you've seen John Wick, and if you haven't, I will explain. An important part of that story is that John Wick was, a member of this hidden assassin society. He retires, he goes and lives with his wife, who dies tragically before the movie starts of cancer. She buys him a puppy. He's trying to live a normal life and be retired and not be this super killer. And then the shithead child of a Russian crime boss tries to buy his fancy car. He says no. The kid gets mad, attacks him in his house, kills his dog, fucks up his shit, and that's the inciting incident of the whole movie. And then the kid goes back and brags to his Russian crime boss father, and then he, like, fucked this guy up, and his dad is like, that was John Wick, you dumb motherfucker, you're dead and I can't save you. And then the rest of the movie is about John Wick exacting his revenge on all these people who wronged him. There's a really cool hotel that's, like, hidden from people and is specifically for assassins, and, like, that whole idea of there being this secret world, there was a crime boss, he was trying to live a normal life, is the foundation for the way we set up the world that Assassins takes place in, which is the same world that Trinity Continuum takes place in. There's just a hidden world of assassins that's part of it. This also draws from martial arts cinema, as you and I were talking about with Exalted earlier, where in the Wuxia stories, there is the idea of the Jianghu, the martial forest, the hidden place where, like, the kung fu people exist and deal with each other, but it is not a place regular people go to. Shadow is the Jianghu. It is the hidden world. Also, my apologies to people who actually speak Chinese. Mandarin. I'm not sure which Chinese language that's from. You have the Shadow is the hidden world of assassins. It is the secret place where contract killings take place. It is the place where your weird ancient coins have money. It is the place where no one looks at you twice for going in with a bronze spear and your cell phone. And then
both of which are covered in blood.
yes, both, and your clothes too.
Yeah,
and you tiredly slide some coins across the countertop at the Hotel Estelia, and the concierge is like, "Dry cleaning services, ma'am." And
I hope all those tokens are just Chuck E. Cheese tokens or something like that. That would be great.
We named them. They're technodrachmae.
Which is a cool word.
It's a very cool word also. Thanks, Violet. And so that's the world of Shadow. And then Twilight is the, like, where the Russian crime boss lives. Mm-hmm. I'm a person who in real life is very much a daylight person. So my examples are like, I don't know, crime.
But I don't. It even mentions that a lot of people that operate in the periphery are still considered to be part of Twilight. Like if you are operating a underground zine by, like, using a printing press off hours or something like that, that can be Twilight. It is more of a question of necessarily rules following than right and wrong. What set of rules do you follow? Daylight, it's kind of the upright citizen stuff or close to that. Twilight is you do still operate on a code. It is just different than Daylight's. And then Shadow has its own.
One of the things the code dictates is that when you have your moment of inspiration, you become an assassin and not a regular talent. You are inducted into Shadow, and you are to abandon your daylit life.
Does the book give, like, baptism rites for that, or is that just something I made up in my head?
I think you made that up, but that's very in theme.
It seems like each group would have one.
Rule the 10th, abandon your daylit life. Discussing the goings-on and the details of a life in Shadow is forbidden. Assassins must not reveal anything about their hidden world to the general public, their families, and especially not daylight authorities. The societies advise that assassins cut their ties entirely and warn that those who do not do so at their own risk. And this is both in part to, like, create their own hidden world, and it is also in part to preserve the lives of the people who you have just awakened into the state of being a weirdly empowered murder machine. You are dealing with powerful and dangerous people, and your wife and kids are 100% in danger, and you should leave them. Or ideally not, but that's where the drama lives, so we're not telling you not to.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned was Occultation, which Mage the Ascension already has the background of Arcane, and we have the Ali Batine that take that to ludicrous extremes. What is Occultation and how does it occur?
Assassins provides a very, very simple, direct solution for how does nobody notice that any of these things go on? How do the assassins operate whole-ass hotel chains that service them specifically? And the answer is Flux, basically. We talked about talents controlling Flux, or Flux influencing them, and that being this quantum force that allows them to bend luck, more or less. Assassin says that when a whole bunch of assassins are together, they generate a whole lot of flux, and that flux bends reality around them and makes people look away. It's not that they don't see that there's a hotel room there, and it's not that they don't see that that guy has blood all over his shoes. It's that they notice it and then go, nah, I'd rather not, and look away.
And I think that works well with going back to ways we can have assassins in our game. Like, Assassins or assassin-like entities are entirely separate from the awakened world, and no one's quite sure what they are. Using Flux might be detectable with Prime, or alternatively to me, Entropy. There could just be the signature of something weird, but it would be very hard to detect, and also explain why no one has noticed them before. It could be the fact that there is a group like the Krugu Vorov who see themselves as kind of the guardians of sleepers, and they have no problem ending the life of a mage who suddenly finds out too much. You mentioned Flux. How does that interface?
Sure. I'm just going to read you this paragraph because it's fantastic and I'm a fan of it. Where assassins gather, the collective force of their inspiration creates something like a barrier of flux. This cordon of energy separates Shadow from the rest of the world. It makes everyday people drive past their glistening bases of operation and think, wonder what people do there, then never consider the place again. Like any other continuum, the bubble of flux affects the temporal flow. The world of Shadow is ever so slightly anachronistic thanks to this unusual manipulation, and protects its residents from extra-dimensional problems. However, this does mean that antiquated technology and weapons, like oil paintings or phonographs or swords, see regular use. Characters with the ability to sense the presence of flux might be able to identify a location as belonging to Shadow by its unusual energy. They'd be wise to leave it well enough alone, though.
I do like the idea that often in Mage, you get the idea that enough Prime in one spot makes it easy for you to spot. One of the things that is menacing about Assassins is it's the opposite. And you also just have the idea that Assassins are simply hyper-competent mortals, and Flux is just an abstraction in the same way that the story path system has momentum. Like, no one has a momentumometer in the game. I'm detecting a rich vein of plot setback followed by triumph up ahead on the plot road. It could be that the Daughters of the Jacobins could be simply a group of hyper-competent mortals, and we have history for this. The technocracy assumed 9/11 was a supernatural thing, and they're like, vampires had to have something involved with this. And they're like, nope, just asshole mortals. This Flux thing kind of solves the problem of, like, how do I make mortals cool without giving them superpowers? It's a way of just kind of to systematize being badass. As a throwaway and prove that I'm a dork, there's a throwaway line in Tradition Book Euthanatoi revised where it mentions that, like, some real old school Euthanatoi don't bother learning spheres and just hulk out on supernatural merits and dots and things. You could do the same thing here, that each of the masteries that we mentioned could just be a way that a mage spends experience points. They never pick up rotes, they never pick up spheres, they just accumulate onto themselves these things. And this accumulation of parlor tricks, parlor trick being the mage term for something that does not incur paradox, is an alternative to magic, that someone could have sworn that off, that they have access to this, but to keep themselves untraceable, they have decided to go this route. So there are a lot of ways one can fit this in. And it does what every good game book should do, is it tells you a compelling story, describes the compelling story, and then gives you mechanics for that compelling story. Gives a whole bunch of them. And I'm wondering, Monica, if you'd be willing to explain to us what some of them are.
Sure. Where do you want to begin with this? I see you want to talk about nemesis.
Yeah, one of the first ones I saw was like nemesis with a capital N. And this to me was the summary of everything that is good and holy and righteous and just in the story path system. What's a nemesis?
A nemesis is what it says on the tin. It's an individual driven to stymie, oppose, and attempt to destroy the assassin. These characters are tied to the assassin through something greater than mere enmity or chance, and their conflicts are driven by something beyond their normal limits. Like, it's not just, fuck you and I hate your face. During character creation, where you are going, I want someone who hates me to appear in this game over and over and over again. So you have, like, the three examples I think are Fixer, Rival Assassin, and Serial Killer Magnet, which are incredible names.
This more or less gives you a recurring antagonist and a boatload of mechanics to make it more than just an enemy. What's the special thing that happens when you engage with your nemesis, or alternatively, when you ignore them?
So in Daylight, if it is unresolved, the nemesis tips law enforcement authorities, the target, or other third parties onto the assassin's whereabouts and actions. Twilight, if unresolved, the nemesis or their associates successfully purloins or destroys some of the assassin's material resources. And Shadow, if unresolved, the nemesis provides a credible threat to the assassin's allies and contacts, causing them to go to ground. The assassin's path contacts have their ratings reduced by the unresolved complication, as do any social edges indicating allied or friendly characters, such as Patron, Trinity Continuum Core Rulebook, page 61, or Conspirators, page XX.
But the idea here is they can mess with you and they don't need to be on screen. They can be a threat besides pointing a gun at you.
Yeah, and 3 complication is a lot. You are almost certainly not overcoming it.
Yeah. To translate that into Mage terms, that's like adding an additional roll or something with the difficulty of where you need 3 successes, and if you don't succeed on that, some crazy thing kind of complicates your life for some period of time for whatever you're trying to do. Could deny you access to one of your backgrounds. To translate this into Mage, you may lose access to a spy network, you may lose access to a talisman or a wonder or something like that. They may interfere with your dots of resources by generating a fake tax audit or raising suspicious activities on a bank card or something like that.
If you can't resolve it, i.e. have enough successes to buy it off, then the thing you were trying to do still happens, but this other thing also happens, and it doesn't prevent you from succeeding, but they are in the way, right? Thus, like, tipping off law enforcement. So, like, if you're trying to kill your hit, you roll with this complication, you succeed enough to kill the guy, but then the nemesis calls the fucking police, right? Like, it is yes, but. And it is specifically that high because the nemesis is supposed to be a pain in the ass. And every so often you will have a hot roll and you'll overcome it and you thwart your nemesis, and that's going to feel great. And most of the time you're going to be like, damn you, nemesis!
And to me, to try and translate this to World of Darkness, where we have neither complications nor do we have momentum, it can certainly be one of those things where, since a nemesis is someone kind of entwined with you at an almost metaphysical level, it could be something where you gain back a point of quintessence. It could be something where you get back a point of willpower when you were able to stymie them, or it could be considered part of character growth when assessing whether or not your character gets XP. This could be represented as a flaw that is kind of the complement or inverse of Avatar Companion. You have this little thing that kind of reincarnates with you. You've got this pain in the ass that kind of does the same thing. There's a bunch of other little things that this game adds that are neat. It gives you a bunch of interesting merits, like null biometrics. You don't leave fingerprints. Your DNA is hard to match. You have a bolt hole. You have access to a place of hiding for various things. It adds a bunch of cool stuff in terms of armor that can make it look like you fake died, cars that are resistant to missiles, gun blades. And it's like, it's rarely effective, but it is very surprising. And I'm like, okay. And Trinity has a really cool weapon system that I think is more crunchy than World of Darkness, but also easier to follow. So it is meatier and easier to chew.
It's robust.
One of the other key crunchy bits that are introduced are flashbacks. What's a flashback, Monica?
So I also want to tell you that Ray wrote this part.
Okay.
So if you were delighted by it, Ray just writes an absolutely phenomenal storytelling section.
Nice.
Flashbacks are a really important part of, like, crime drama and these types of stories where you kick back to something that happened previously, either to declare that you were already prepared for this or that you had a contingency plan.
But narratively, the idea here is that a lot of people are not interested in planning every moment of an espionage or assassination or a competence game. So how do we shortcut that without hand-waving everything away? And that's seemingly what the flashback system does. So mechanically, how does a flashback work?
They cost a certain number of points of either inspiration or momentum. 0 is something that more or less makes sense to just retroactively agree on happened. And I believe it says optionally a story guide could require a character to possess appropriate skills, attributes, or facets before making a 0-point flashback. Just like, oh, you have pilot 3? Of course you know that the arm of the garage door would be down earlier. It's really, this is not a dramatic editing so much as accounting for a character's general expertise. So like, oh yes, of course your character would know that. That's the basic thing, right? And you get to retroactively change the narrative because you were like, I think I would have spotted that. Or like...
Yeah, you have 4 dots of etiquette. You're being visited by Zarthanax, Lord of Flame. Yes, you do have enough fire extinguishers here. I don't need you to put that into the narrative.
And then you have the 1-point ones, which are either 1 inspiration or 2 momentum. And they are either a small amount of time or a few extra resources, and they grant you something useful, equipment, information, or a small element of the scene change. And the example says, like a plan to cut the power to the office tower, and the player wants to have like shoddy engineering and a friend in city planning to get a hold of the officer's tower's electrical floor plan ahead of time, right? And 2 being multiple advantages or 1 that's very significant. demand considerable time or resources on the character in exchange for the ability to bypass a difficult challenge or major element of the scene. And I think stating bypass a difficult challenge or change a major element is a really good metric for like, why is this 2 points?
That is the flashback to the character drinking the guard under the table to steal their key card or something like that, to bypass a door.
Yeah. Flashback is that the character leaned on her city planning friend from her blueprints, spent the night meticulously plotting a separate path for her team through the building, and then in the current scene, the character flashes a cheeky grin and pulls a drywall saw out of her duffel, ready to cut a new hallway through the walls between empty offices and conference rooms. The setup being like, oh, I already read these blueprints. I know that there's basically nothing between these two walls and we can just go through, which would be a major edit in the scene. The 3.1 is a setup so intricate, so unlikely, so fortuitous for the characters that it begins to stretch the table's suspension of disbelief, requiring 3 inspiration or 6 momentum, or more, depending on how miraculous people want it to be. These flashbacks require miracles of fortune, serendipity, and story-swerving dramatic turns. They grant advantages that can tip the scales of a scenario or even an entire campaign. And we sure are telling you that it is okay to allow people to do something this ridiculous, but it will cost you.
It is also one of those things to me that because general tools like this exist, it also means that the storyteller can set the bar pretty high.
Yep.
When you know you have the ability to flashback to get the plans of an entire building, yes, they need to find a particular cell phone that was left in a 110-story office building during a fire alarm.
Right.
Have fun, kids!
I mean, that's also the conceit of the genre.
Yes. Since we do not have inspiration and we do not have momentum, the way I generally take care of this in Mage, because flashbacks make everything easier, I have the characters create a preparation pool ahead of time where they say, what are the backgrounds and things you could do to reasonably prepare for this? We roll a whole bunch of dice. That is now your inspiration pool for this mission that anyone can draw from, assuming that they have the ability to justify it with a flashback. Your character has 3 dots of contacts pertaining to this. You have clairvoyance. Another character has the ability to read fate, do all those dice, and now we've got these pool of points that can be pulled from for a mission. This is also how I deal with things like, do I need to stipulate every potion that I want my character to have? No, let's do some sort of preparedness and readiness roll. And for me, it's 0 points if it's obvious that it would have on you, 1 point if it's something that you might think to bring, to 4, this is something that requires knowing the true name of a person before meeting them or something like that. But this kind of framework of there are points that are solely being consumed to deal with complications, I find interesting because it forces people to kind of be like, okay, do we want to just overcome this, or do we want to have to deal with what Terry has planned and save those points for a complication that could come up with later? So even if you don't take inspiration or some other system that isn't necessarily diegetic, we can still port this into the old World of Darkness with a little bit of work.
We do outright say that if a proposed flashback feels dull or offers significant advantages for little cost, work with the player to come up with more intriguing consequences for this flashback, or consider saying no. If a proposed flashback breaks with the established tone or themes of your game, work with the player to adjust the flashback to better fit the game the table decided on, or consider saying no. If a proposed flashback is rubbing one or more players at the table the wrong way, work with everyone to make sure no one is agreeing to an element of the game that makes them uncomfortable, or consider saying no. If a flashback makes you, the story guide, uncomfortable for whatever reason, including suspicions that your player might be trolling you, work with the player to uncover their true intentions or steer them away from content you aren't prepared to narrate, or consider saying no.
I think a very powerful storytelling tactic is to show how canny your bad guy is by inserting their flashbacks in to show how they have prepared for you.
Yeah, there is a whole section on competing flashbacks. The competing flashbacks talks about, like, the face-off where they play 3D chess against each other behind the scenes. It walks you through the idea of competing flashbacks between someone trying to do one thing and then, like, your suggestion of the canny villain who also is prepared for this, and that, like, I reveal my secret technique. No, I reveal my secret technique.
And kind of the last 2 bits I wanted to discuss are skill tricks and masteries. Skill tricks are just kind of an alternative to specialties, it seems, where once a character gets 3 dots, they can get a skill trick, and they can get 1 for 1 dot for that does something cool. And these have glorious names and descriptors. My favorite two were Gunpoint Diplomacy, where you can add firearms to a social role if you're pointing a gun at someone, or otherwise have have an advantageous decision.
Elliot wrote these, and they are the best skill tricks in any story path game.
The Elliot I like? I don't know if there's more than one Elliot.
Yeah, no, it's the Elliot you like.
The other one that I very much liked as a Mage fan, where we are frequently dealing with people in libraries that need to hit other people, is Battle-Ready Historian. The character is a student of ancient weapons, drawing on techniques refined throughout ages. The player chooses a broad period of history, such as ancient China or medieval Europe. When learning this trick, when attacking with a weapon from the period, they may activate this trick to add their humanity score to the roll. And just the idea of being like, I am going to roll dexterity plus art. To deal lethal damage, I find very pleasing. These are things that are below generally things that you have to you don't have to spend points on these, right? These are just things you get.
You get them. Yeah, you just get them for having a high enough skill.
Yeah. But above that, you have masteries. What are masteries?
So masteries are gifts, which are what Trinity Continuum characters have that are their special powers, right? They're explicitly not specifically supernatural. They're weird bending of luck. They give you weird, cool powers. While gifts make a talent appear exceptional, masteries make an assassin clearly outside the realm of possibilities. No one sees an assassin use a mastery and thinks to themselves that such an action was normal. Of course, very few people see an assassin use a mastery and live to tell the tale.
Did you have any favorites?
This is just a smorgasbord of delightful, weird powers. I
was a big fan of a good hat. If you're revealed during the approach or escape phase, you can spend juice to make it so that the target only remembers some detail about you. Socks with sandals. Also, as we'd mentioned before, best dressed, you always look immaculate no matter what you're doing. Your level of injury, your die penalty from being harmed, becomes an enhancement to your social roles. And I'm just like, Trinity does what good games to me do, and not only does it have good mechanics, but it makes the mechanics play well with each other in a way that is interesting. Rather than adding complexity, it adds depth, which uses existing things in new and interesting ways. Total destruction. If you successfully strike someone else's weapon, you can send out a shockwave that blows up all other weapons nearby. And you're just like, well, that's cool. Good manners. You explain your plan to your target, how you did everything, and then you basically roll to make them like you. And if they either like you a lot or hate you a lot, you get to add that to all your combat rolls against that person. Apollo, your ranged attacks generally penetrate armor. They always do a minimum amount of damage and are very hard to heal from. They're a lot and they're all great.
I like at their heels, in their head. The guilty act in predictable ways, moving along well-worn paths you can follow with your eyes closed. A moment's thought gives you insight into where they will be and how best you might get there. This knowledge is often chilling to the targets of your wrath, which in turn is a tool to make them even more predictable. You spend some juice, you figure out where the target will be at a specific time, and they gain a condition where you gain enhancement equal to the value of that condition, which ticks up the longer that you track them, and once you reach them, the condition resolves, and you basically get to hit them really hard by hunting them down.
It's all great. I mean, I sound repetitive here, but if I play a Trinity game, it's going to be Trinity Assassins. I've talked a lot. I've gushed about it before. There's also an amazing framework on how to set up an attempt to murderate someone. It breaks it down into phases. It has recommendations to the storyteller of how to plot that. So Monica, in addition to this, including a lot of mechanics, a lot of people and so on, it also kind of includes adventures, but they're not what I would call traditional adventures like a dungeon crawl or anything like that. What are they and how are they kind of arranged?
Set piece sequence. We call these set piece sequences. We include a handful of those, which we refer to as a black box. And the black box itself is a closed set of fields describing the overall area in which the assassination will occur, with the target unawares at the start. More generally, a holistic system for the entire assassination session. So that's where the approach and the escape. The approach is the first part of this assassination attempt. So you basically build this big set piece fight in which your character is ultimately going to throw down with the person who is their hit, right? There is some degree of assumed gameplay where like you're going to build up towards this. Like not every session is just going to be your characters putting bullets into people's heads. That would be boring. So there's build up, and then you build up to the big conflict. And that's where you use the set piece fight. It has an opportunity, which is an advantage or unique method for the assassin to kill their target. It has points of ingress, which are tracks that allow players to undergo a session story, culminating in that opportunity. A session story is a vignette or side story adjacent to the overall timeline of the target, which begins with the point of ingress and ends with the opportunity. And ticks are how this progresses in narrative time. Every 5 ticks moves the overall mission ahead in some defined way. So you basically have the GM has a little timer that's running while you're doing this. And we provide 3 black boxes with all of these things in there. Those come with their own pre-built timers to let you know when to make things get worse.
And these are all pretty easy to gamify in Mage. It may be the case that you need to supernatural it up a little bit more, because generally it is assassins going up against mortals or possibly other inspired. If we're doing this in Mage, the important thing, though, is it gives a really good framework that it says, these things tend to involve a stronghold. There are legions or subordinates. There is a final form where you resolve things. And if nothing else, it is very good advice about how to lay out and arrange stories of this type. It is a common layout, and it is something that is agnostic to system generally. Obviously, Trinity Assassin has a bunch of systems that it adds to it to kind of keep it moving and keeping it going. But they are all here, and they are all certainly usable, and there's nothing saying that it needs to ascend in assassination in a non-assassination game. This could also be used for espionage or theft or something like that. We have done a pretty rapid-fire once-over of this. Monica, do you have any closing thoughts or any other bits that you're particularly proud of, or alternatively, what you're doing next that we should look out for?
Let me throw out something that we didn't touch on during when we were talking about Masteries, and that Masteries totally have the Wuxia story type thing where, like, you can learn these secret techniques from other people, which means that some people highly guard their secret techniques, or like you could discover someone's hidden scrolls of assassinating, or you can also weave a story of like 2 assassin schools fighting over ownership over a secret technique or an ancient text full of Society of Leonidas murder methods, which gives it this interesting sort of texture and contrast to talents who just sort of naturally fall into these things.
And if anything fits into a Mage game, it is I need to find the scroll of the 7 resplendent poses that allow me to do this particular route where I can like poke you in the picky finger and your head explodes or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It also gives a diegetic reason that certain things could be hidden that you certainly need to find. So Monica, what else are you up to, and where can we find out what you're doing?
Well, if you want to hear more of me talking about game design, the wild world of the tabletop industry, you can listen to myself and Ray, who I mentioned a whole bunch of times in this episode, on Bonus Experience, bxpcast.com, or go to misdirectedmarknetwork.com and click the button that says Bonus Experience. We got a cool logo that looks like a die. It is currently on our off season. We're taking a little creative break before we come back next year. But if you have never listened to BXP before, we have a delightful back catalog of things for you to listen to. And of course, you can hear me and Terry on the now concluded but still available to listen to Systematic Understanding of Everything. If you want to learn everything, well, not really everything, but a real good summary of all there is to know about Exalted.
It takes a mere 30 hours approximately. So
it does.
Yeah.
And that's the overview. That's not even like, they weren't like deep dives. This was a very good 101. And I will probably be back on this show again, or I'll probably appear on Pain in the Dice or something else. I'll be on another show that Terry hosts. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I am at Zenith Sun.
Monica, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a good time.
This has been Mage the Podcast, who would never call out a hit on you unless you broke one of the 10 principles of being an assassin. Our show is made possible by our executive producers, who are Alex, Anders S., Anon, Berto, Boo, Boogers, Brad with the Blue, Bryce Perry, Dan Svensson, Dennis Osborne, Elliot Osborne, Gargle Noir, George Lara, Guy Conan Stewart, La Bull, Isabel Castillo, Jason Kennedy, Jason Vines, Jason W. Biggs, Jeff Bryn, Jenna F., John Magnuson, Josh H., Joshua Heath, Carl Halperin, Leslie Weatherstone, Matthew Prohl, Michael Creedle, Michael Parker, Nibero, Neil Patterson, Nikita Klaimanov, Oliver Schindler, Patrick Mulder, Ralph Scheinhammer, Ricardo, Richard Bat Brewster, Rob H., Ryan Hilton, Ryan Kendi, Sam Tobin, Stephen Carton, Thrice Great, William Connolly, William Martin, and W. Starter. Special thanks to our Oracle supporters, Jay Widener, Oracle of Assassins who kill people with elaborate traps, Christopher Phillips, Oracle of Assassins that kill people with exotic weapons, and Buck Farmer, Oracle of Assassins who aren't idiots and recognize that guns and knives are remarkably capable ways of dispensing with someone. Our EPA shoutout is to Elliot Osborne. I mentioned the movie The Warriors based on the book by Saul Urich, which is based on the Anabasis by Xenophon. It has the best gang names in it, and I just wanted to share those. The Gramercy Riffs, the Van Cortlandt Rangers, the Turnbull ACs, the Moonrunners, the Orphans, the Boppers, the Hurricanes, the Baseball Furies, the Rogues, the Lizzies, the Punks, the Hi-Hats, the Electric Eliminators, the Savage Huns, the Jones Street Boys, the Saracens, the Satan's Mothers, the Destroyers, the Warriors, the Panzers, the Gladiators, and the Boyle Avenue Runners. Thanks for your support. If you super like this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or at magethepodcast on Twitter. We have a Hop and Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. If you like us, please give us a review on the platform of your choosing or tell a friend about us. You can also always support us by using our links in our show notes to get something on DriveThruRPG. Also go to magethepodcast.com for show notes and all of our previous shows. Now go change reality. Bye. And here are some bits I cut from the actual interview, but I think do a good job of capturing Monica and mine chaotic energy.
That's true. That would have been smart.
This is a case of, oh no, Monica, I'm going down with you if I make a mistake.
Go with, all right. Yeah, okay.
That thing where people pay us, Patreon.
Ray wrote an extremely gay story about the reincarnation of Gilgamesh, and then it's about her, being frenemies and fighting with the Enkidu figure, and it is gay and funny, as one would expect from fiction from Ray.
And once you're marked anathema, generally you have to go out to the border marches or the middle marches and seek the protection of the Silver Pact. So,
right, yes, basically.
Yeah, duh. They're all the same game, basically.
Presuming they'll take you.
Yeah. I think the Society of Leonidas wins.
Okay, all right.
Did
you mean the Assassin's Creed?
I'm not familiar with that. Okay, got it.
Oh, okay. All right. They're highly inspired by a lot of the stuff from Assassin's Creed. And anybody who is a big fan of Assassin's Creed is like, oh, it's the Assassin's Creed guys. And it's like, yeah, it's the Assassin's Creed guys.
I hope in the Assassin's Creed world, they're simply known as the Assassin's Creed guys.
Assassin's Creed guys?
Yeah. There's no other name. The Guild of Calamitous Intent.
Totally the Guild of Calamitous Intent.
Scarlet Empire, yeah. Again, same world.
Yeah.
Are they the ones? Is their signature move Good Manners, the monologue move?
It's Good Manners, and then the one about having it and the hat.
Okay.
I
picked both of those as my ones that I liked. my 23andMe results are betraying themselves. When my Storypath Nexus publication Death by Dulcimer comes out, you will know that the Mountain families have been resurrected to their full glory. Kind of like in Werewolf, if they go delirium and you have a high enough willpower, you're like, that's not right, where everyone else is like actively, the shit in their pants is shitting its pants, or something like that.
The Stations of Darkness are a really cool thing that I think this book does, and then I really want to talk about how assassins are occluded from regular people, because I wrote it, and it's probably one of my favorite parts of the book.
It's no Blazeball fanfiction, but still, it's good.
That one long form piece of Blazeball fanfiction is some of the best prose I wrote in 2020, and I was furious with myself for it being so good.
Mm-hmm. I had gotten 2.5 hours of sleep about 2 weeks ago before I gave a presentation, and everyone there agreed it was the best one I had ever done. And it was frustrating, and I had a toothache during the entire thing, too.
I hate it when that happens.
So that is my weird version of sympathy. Before I go to the rest...
I followed.
Yeah.
I want to throw out there that the line about they drive past the glistening bases of operation and think, wonder what people do there, and then never consider the place again, is something I do in real life often. 100% based on me visiting a city or driving over to a vacation spot and occasionally driving past an interesting looking building and just being like, oh, wonder what goes on in there, and then never thinking about it again. Do you do that? Is that just...
No, I stop in and I try and figure out what they do. I have a mixed record.
Oh, yeah, I figured. That you just walk right up and ring the bell and are like, hey, are you doing something illegal in here?
I'm not quite that forward. There was a colleague of mine. There were a whole bunch of, I will simply use the term, massage parlors. And in a particular street in Philadelphia. And they're like, yeah, well, I mean, there's a door. It's unlocked. You have to be able to just go in. I want to see what one of these places looks like. And he just popped in. He's like, what do you do here? And the lady at the front counter goes, it was like something like nothing you'll ever benefit from, basically to say anyone who pops their head into one of these places and screams, what do you do here, is someone who's never going to find out what they do there. And it's just like, oh yeah, definitely hand jobs. I'm like, thanks, Phil. Ladies.
Ladies.
Hold on, let me go open my window. That way all the underwear that is sure to come careening towards me after what I'm about to say doesn't break it. I was comparing the average number of words per page for different publishers.
I think I used that word earlier.
Would you describe the system as thick with 2 C's?
No.
Okay. I don't even know what that would mean for a system to be she-thick. Just because it's Trinity Assassins, the only thing they kill is boredom. And people. That just reminds me of like, and knowing is half the battle. The other half is violence. Nope, you're really going to have to sell me for it. And this is me trolling the player where it's like, oh, you want to play into this trope? I'm going to test your knowledge. Let's see. We're both driving towards the cliff. Let's see who blinks first. I originally was like, yeah, it's smaller. Books are valued by how much they weigh and so on. And then someone's like, Terry, I need you to play in a one-shot. You need to read this today. I'm like, thank God, Trinity's small and well-written. Like, Terry learned that lesson real fast.
Usually part of my author squad.
Got it. When you hit a button? Okay.
Yeah, I sound the horn of Gondor and like 12 people appear. Like, do you have work for me?